Pst Lee Hombogo. I am the lead pastor of Fotress Assembly, and we also lead an interdenominational prayer ministry called the Gracewell, along with my husband, Apostle Dennis. And God has blessed us with 4 babies. And I grew up as a pastor's kid. My father is my bishop. And it was amazing. It was some pressure here and there, but it was wonderful. My parents were very prayerful, so I grew up in a prayerful home, and they were amazing parents, and just a childhood like any other. Yeah. The most important thing for me now that I can say looking back is the fact that, first of all, it felt that ministry is for everybody, and that it is our responsibility to serve God, every Christian, because I saw everyone serve God in one capacity or another. But the second thing, I feel like growing up in a pastor's house really shaped my faith. So some of the things that people would consider challenging or difficult, or for me, because I saw them, I experienced blind eyes being opened, deaf ears being opened. I saw miracles in my childhood, and I feel like it really shaped my faith and my perception, especially in seeing that nothing is impossible with God. Yeah. What led me to begin a WhatsApp prayer group was an experience that I had had that sort of shaped my ministry now. And what had happened is I had grown up in church, but at some point, like nearly every pastor's kid, I was just feeling like I need a breather. My whole life was the church. And so for about 3-4 years, I wasn't very consistent. I would go to church consistently, but my relationship with God wasn't the most consistent. But I had come from such an intense prayer background that prayer was still very central for me. And so what happened was I went through this very traumatic experience in a relationship. And when that relationship ended, it ended with everything around me. So things just started to fall apart. I had been in a church. I had to leave church. By that time, I had, recommitted my life to Christ, and I had been serving, and I was very central in the church. But when that relationship ended, I had to leave church, and then I lost my business, and then I lost my livelihood, and I had to move back with my parents. And when I moved home, I remember I didn't know what to do, and I only had 2 things that the Lord had been saying to me consistently. He had been saying, 1, let me show you that I love you, because I was going through such a faith crisis, wondering if God cares about me. Is he thinking about me? Does he love me? And I was even struggling to pray a whole lot. And so I remember the Lord told me, let me show you that I love you. And I didn't know what that meant. But the second thing he said was, I want you to bring women together to pray. So in my mind, I thought that it would be just a few women in my sitting room. And I thought it would be, we vent, then we pray. We vent to each other, then we pray. I did not know what the Lord was intending to do. So when I eventually moved home after this traumatic experience, I was living in my parents' home, in the room I grew up in, sleeping in the bed I grew up in, and I was so frustrated, nearly depressed. And I remember the Lord telling me, I want you to begin a WhatsApp group and teach people how to pray. So it felt like a very strange thing to me, because I wasn't praying much. I was struggling to pray, and I was just feeling such a disconnect with God at that time. But the push was so strong that I decided to just start. And when I started, I added everybody who cannot left, my mother, my aunties, my people who would not be able to leave the WhatsApp group. And we began to pray. And today we are about 7,000 people on our WhatsApp groups alone, and more on other platforms. Yeah. So how we transitioned from the WhatsApp group into physical meeting was that we you know, we began to pray like consistently, and the Lord began to do great things in our midst. And I remember that at that time, I was very surprised that I was in that situation and God was moving so powerfully. And at that time, videos were not very common. So we were doing text. Like we would actually just type out all the prayers, type out every devotion, type out everything in the WhatsApp group. So we would say we're doing a 21-day fast, and we would type out all the prayers and people would begin to fast. And I began connecting with people from different parts of the country. We began as women, but men also began to plug in. So one day the women began to request, can we please have a physical meeting? And I remember we began with an overnight retreat, and it was amazing. We had a wonderful time at the retreat. God moved powerfully, and the ladies said, can we have another one? So then that's when we transitioned to an eatery somewhere in town. And they had a little hall just next to them, a shop front, like just right on the road. And that's where we began. So we began to meet every third Saturday of the month, just a few people. And I would travel from my parents' place 3 hours away and come about 2 hours away and come all the way and travel back at night, because that's where I was living at the time. Yeah. Some of the milestones that we have seen as we have grown is even just beginning the monthly meetings and believing God that every month people would show up. And you have to understand that I was not at my best, you know. The odds were against me in that sense, like I was going through so much at the time. And so even just beginning and then meeting regularly was a big milestone for us. But the second milestone was that now we had to believe God for sound. We had to believe God for decor. We had to believe God for, you know, like we had to start believing God for absolutely everything. And even when we would do that, it feels like life is about, you know, stretching yourself in the next big step of faith, because God kept giving us new instructions. So every time we would, you know, we would buy this sound or whatever, or lights, and then the Lord would say, okay, now it's time to do something else. And then one day, the Lord said, this is time. And I had invited a guest to the meeting, and the guest said, it's about time for you to move. And I could feel a witness in my heart for us to move to a better venue, a bigger venue. And when I went to the venue, it was so expensive. Now looking back, like I can't believe I thought it was very expensive, but for us at that time it was so expensive. We were very few, and I could feel the urgency in the spirit. And so we just decided to take a leap, and we jumped and we moved. And from that time, every time the Lord has asked us to move, he has been faithful to catch us when we jump at his word. Yeah. Did I face any resistance or discouragement? Absolutely. I think the first one is self-doubt. The first level of discouragement is second guessing myself. So initially I'd see myself as a convener. I never saw myself as a preacher. I never saw myself, you know, as literally like the leader, the lead minister. I saw myself as the gatherer of the people. Then other people would preach to them. And the Lord began to say, no, 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 I have put something in you for the people. So overcoming self-doubt was quite interesting for me. The second thing was that there were times when I would travel all the way and there were very few people. Actually, before I ever traveled home, I feel like this is very interesting for somebody who's starting ministry. Before I travel, before I traveled home and began the WhatsApp group, we had a few physical meetings. And I remember that one of those days, a friend of mine had given me sound and a venue and everything I needed. And we had been meeting just a few ladies. And one of those days I had done a flyer, I had done the sound, I had done everything. And I showed up to the place and I was by myself. Nobody came. And I was so upset. I know how preachers say, oh, I preached to the seats as if there were 1,000 people, not me. I just sat down and felt bad about it. And I feel like that was maybe one of the lowest lows at that time. That was one of the lowest lows for me. And then that advice that it was time for me to take a breather and move home, then the WhatsApp group began. But the issue of you don't know who will come and who will not come. You don't know who will believe in you and who will not. I think that was also a challenge. But the third thing, and I feel like this is a common challenge for preachers, is the finances to do what the Lord has asked you to do. But I determined that I would just begin, I would just start. And as I would start, I would believe that the Lord would move in power to command the resources that we needed. Yeah. I have openly shared about having a son before marriage, and that traumatic situation that I went through was actually a divorce. And I do remember that it ended while I was pregnant. The marriage ended while I was pregnant. And this whole moving back with my parents was while I was pregnant, and I was very sickly and I didn't know if I would make it. And when my son was born, God gave me a prophetic word, and he gave me a prophetic word, 2 words that he gave me. And he said, one, that raising my child alone would not be raising my child with God was not going to be raising my child alone. And I feel like that gave me a lot of encouragement and even boldness. But the second thing that the Lord said is that my child was not going to be a reason for me not to serve him, but would become like such a key for me. And in terms of opening doors, I felt like God was saying that my son had become like the mark of a time of a shift for me. And that's exactly what the Lord did. So I would actually just travel with him. I would preach with him. I would, I would have him strapped on my back as I was praying for people. Sometimes as I was preaching, and I was determined not to allow a blessing to become an excuse for me not to serve the Lord. And it has been amazing. So my ministry began there. So I had a little baby. I was alone, and I began my ministry literally just shutting out the voices within and the external voices that were, those voices of second guessing my ministry. And the Lord just kept encouraging my heart. And so the Gracewell, which is the prayer ministry, just began to grow. It began to be established, and God did many things in our midst, including healing marriages, including, the very things I was feeling like I was disadvantaged in were the things that God was expressing himself very loudly in the ministry. And that was such an encouragement for me. And so eventually the Lord said that we needed now to begin to also plant a church. And I feel like this is where my all the voice, like all the second guessing and the people that doubted. Before the church, the prayer ministry seemed fine. For me, having gone through a divorce, very few people spoke about it. But on the day that the flyer went out that I was planting a church, and this was like a full-on questioning from everywhere. Like, why do you think you can start a church as a woman? You've gone through a divorce, you are a single mom. And there was all these questions around me. And I thank God because I am submitted to my parents, who felt that they agreed with me that it was time for me to plant the church, and they supported me. And the Lord brought 8 people who we began to fellowship with, gearing up to the launch of the church. And our church launched on the 3rd of November in 2019. And that was just so amazing. And I remember driving back home that evening and wondering, oh my God, what have I done? But God gave us grace and we began to grow. And as we came into 2020 is when I met my husband. Towards the end of 2020 is when I met my husband. And he was leading a church as well. And when we agreed to, to come into Fotress together, Fotress Assembly is the church that we lead. And God has just been amazing in seeing how he can join hearts together. Two strong people joined our hearts together, and the people around us agreed with us. And God has just blessed our union and our ministries together. Yeah. How serving together has shaped and sharpened our personal and spiritual lives is because I feel like my character has grown quite a lot in, serving God alongside my husband. My character has grown. I feel like there's a sense of understanding of, the responsibility that is there in not just calling out greatness in another person, but supporting them in their own. And I feel like that has also translated to a commitment to do the same for the community that I serve, and also the commitment to unity, the unity of the body that begins with our own unity. And I feel that unity has a lot to do with humility. There has to be a lot of, stepping down for the other person, which is literally what I did, because I was lead pastor, but then he is the overseer of our ministry, the ministry that I started. And it takes a lot of awareness and even a sense of security and coming into great healing for you to be able to do that. Most people will be like, no, I will hold on to this. And I see how it would feel like you need to hold on to it. But I also feel like we have both grown. Our ministry has expanded. We've been able to plant several branches because we have both been able to support one another, and with humility commit to be united for the sake of the cause of Christ. Yeah. So how the team came together for us to plant Fotress Assembly was that I began a fellowship in the house. And so about 8 people were there on the first day. And when they came, we just began to talk, and we forecasted that it would take about 1.5 years for us to plant a church, but God had a different plan. So things began to work together quickly so that we were able to launch in about 6 months. And that team was not picked out. This was the entire team, was the whole serving team. We did not have like a keyboardist. We did not have, so I remember we all had to train for sound. We all had to train. We had to have someone train us on how to connect sound. We had to have someone train all of us on Sunday school. All of us were trained on evangelism. All of us were trained on ushering. All of us were trained on protocol. Everything that needed to be done in church, we were a 100% serving team. And so as we were gearing up to the planting of the church, we began like intense training. I also went into a school of church planting that really empowered me in that regard. And so the team came together in that way. But then when we launched out, other people began to join us, and that's how the serve team was formed. And so we began, and as we went along, and maybe this is important for somebody who's planning to start, because most people want to have everything together, every duck in line. But I feel that when you begin is when people need something to come to, and that's when people began to come that was specifically designed for certain things in the church. Yeah. One of the things that has helped to govern multiplication for us is the view that church planting is not difficult. I feel like perception is critical, and we determined early to see God's instructions as not difficult. If the Lord said that this is what I want the church to focus on, for example, one of our one of our key areas is prayer. We determine in our hearts not to wrestle with the instructions of God. And so from the first day that Fotress began, we started training for planting, because the Lord had spoken to me that we would be a church planting commission. And so we began to train early on, and I would tell them, every one of you, you can plant a church if the Lord puts it in your heart. And it was ridiculous because some of them were teenagers, some of them were very young, but those very young now are lead pastors just a few years later. So perception was critical. But secondly, after you have the correct perception, it is important for you to begin to invest in the proper knowledge. And so we're very big on training leaders and training and bringing up ministers. And I feel that the fact that we invest in it every single Sunday, we are training, and it has changed our lives and even our results. Yes. The role that serving others has played in my ministry life is that I completely believe that if you are faithful with another man's work, that God will give you your own. And with the very measure that you sow into somebody else's work will be the same that other people will into your work. And for a long time, I served my pastor in protocol. And I served with all of my heart. I feel like I learned a lot from her and from them. And as I served them, I feel like it set a path. I remember one day, our lead pastor, I was driving his wife, and he called me and he told me, "Thank you for being faithful in serving us, and as you have served us, other people will serve you. As you have served us, God will raise other people to serve you." And I've never forgotten that, because that is what the Lord did. If there is a grace that the Lord gave us, is the gift of men. And I believe it is because both me and my husband, there's a place of grace, there's a place of mercy. But if we have any input in it, is because me and my husband separately, before we met, we were both serving other people in diligence. Yeah. The most important thing about how my spiritual walk has grown through the various seasons is the fact that every day the Lord has established the fact that He is a gracious, kind, and good Father in my life. I feel that growing up, for me, I felt like I needed to perform. I felt like I needed to perform. I felt like I needed to, to act a certain way, to rise up to a certain standard that I could never rise up to. It just felt like I was always trying to attain something. And over the years, one of the things that the Lord has consistently taught me and established in my heart is that I am accepted in the beloved. That just as I am, sisi ndio tuko, that God has just placed in us His grace. Just, He has just accepted us as we are. I feel that realization not only has changed my walk with God, but my prayer life. I don't approach with fear and terror. I approach God with boldness to receive mercy and grace every time that I am in need. Also, it has changed my results, because I think like a son. I'm not thinking like a servant. I'm not thinking, I'm not serving the Lord for a pay. I'm serving Him because I know I have an inheritance. This is our kingdom. This is my Father's house. I feel that understanding the fatherhood of God has changed me as a son of God and has affected my results in ministry. Yeah. The disciplines that have helped us, or what we call the consecrations that have helped us, is number one, we pray. So I remember a few years ago, my friends were so concerned because they would say, you pray too much, you're praying a lot, you're praying this, you're praying. But the lifting of God over our lives has been, God told us that the focus for my entire life will be prayer. And prayer has changed my life completely. And I remember what a struggle it was in the beginning when I began to take it as a discipline. But as we have gone on, it has become easier and easier to spend more time in prayer with God. So we are primarily a prayer ministry, and that has been very critical for our growth, and even for my leadership, for my husband's leadership, for our people, for the formation of their businesses, for the rising of their careers. Prayer has been very critical. The second one is commitment to the word. Our commitment to the word has been very important, because we feel that as much as you pray, you have got to have the manual for prayer. You have to be able to not pray amiss. And how we have done that is by committing to sound doctrine. The third one is fellowship and the discipline of being in the fellowship. I feel that sometimes for pastors it can be challenging, because these are the people that you're leading, and sometimes you want to focus so much on, you know, the prayer, the word, that you are unable to interact much with people. But interaction is critical as prayer is. And so our commitment to community, to family, to, you know, to being together with the people, that is part of our consecration. And I feel that that has been such an important thing for me as a leader. And the last one is giving. And when I say giving, I don't mean giving just of finances, but giving of myself. Okay, maybe I should say sacrifice. And sacrifice in terms of our time, in terms of our gifts, in terms of our love, in terms of our finances, in terms, you know, in every way that we have laid down our life for God. Whatever he needs from us, he can have. Yeah. How I've navigated culture as a woman leader is, first of all, the acknowledgement that it's a very patriarchal society. I think that surprised me, because I didn't think ministry was that patriarchal, but I could see the undertones, and you know, I know that there is a certain bias against women. It's unfortunate to say, but it's there. But one of the things that the Lord taught me early is, if you're very good at what you do, people forget your age, people forget your gender, people forget the things they would be biased against. If you rise up and, you know, be good at what you do, they are likely to not consider those things that they would be biased. So I just prayed and asked the Lord, fill me with the spirit of excellence, so that men will not consider, you know, they will not be biased against me because of my gender. Fotress Assembly is committed to the community. The Lord spoke to us a few years ago, actually before the church began, for us to begin with a feeding program. For some reason, for one of the assignments that the Lord gave us was that we shall be feeders of nations. And so we began, first of all, by, you know, a few food baskets. We call them concern baskets, just a few of them. During COVID, that arm of our ministry grew exponentially. But then immediately after COVID, we began to do a street feeding ministry, and we were feeding about 100 street children every week. But apart from that, we have been able to support people with school fees. We've been able to support people with different needs, medical needs, and all of that the Lord has placed on our hearts. We are committed every month that a portion of what the Lord brings is used to directly, you know, assist the people that are around us. For the future, we look forward to doing a school. There are two things in the recent future that the Lord has asked us to do, and one of them is a school, and the second one is a clinic. So that's what we're looking forward to. Yeah. Today's church can help to shape culture primarily by discipleship. I feel that one of the biggest gaps of our day, and it's because we are an evangelistic nation, is the fact that people have not been very well discipled. But I see the turn. I know now there is a shift, and God has sort of been raising up disciples everywhere. And you know, it's amazing that discipleship is not coming only from the pulpit, but God is raising people from every bit of the church, even the people who you wouldn't expect, even the people with no titles, the people who are just in the marketplace, in different places, and God is raising people to disciple. I feel that the strongest way for us to influence culture is discipleship, that we consistently teach what the culture of the kingdom is until it is deeply embedded in us. And I also feel like we have to start from when they are children, with our children, when they are small, that we, instill the values of our kingdom in them, that they will not depart from them. What God was teaching me in those early days in the WhatsApp ministry, the first thing that the Lord was teaching me is that it is not over. It's not over until He says so. And that you could be totally knocked out, feeling like you have nothing that you bring to the table. But God is the one who lifts the poor from the dust and sits them with princes. God is able to change the destinies of men, and the stories of people can be rewritten by grace. Those were the lessons that He was teaching me. Also, He was teaching me about the power of prayer to alter the destinies of men. Yeah. What I believe has changed a lot in regards to my personality in my journey is the fact that as I have healed from my different experiences, I feel that the person I thought I was probably a person trying to protect themselves. It's as if God has introduced me to myself. When you come into secure spaces, you can be able to put your guard down. When you come into places of safety, you don't have to be very guarded. You can be able to bring, and then you start to discover, this is the way I am. This is what I like. I'm confident in this area. I need help in this area. And like when you're on survival mode, you're always trying to protect yourself. So even you don't know what you're like. And I feel that my personality has come alive in so many ways in the last few years, and just seeing what as a leader I'm truly like. Also, I didn't know that I could lead the way I lead. I didn't know that I had it in me, and the Lord has really introduced to me a leader, encouraged me that being feminine, a feminine leader, embracing my femininity is powerful for my role in leadership. And I do feel like what God is doing in the church now in that regard is that the Lord is apart from what's going on the pulpit, is that God is empowering people. I'm not disregarding what the Lord is doing from the pulpit. I feel like God is empowering people to be an influence even outside of the church, and the various experiences that people have gone through, because I have seen how even the issues of the economy has affected so many people, their worldview, their faith, how they relate with people, how a person who has gone through an abusive situation, how they relate with other people, how conscious, how guarded, how they are. But what happens is that as the church begins to delve deeper into prayer, into the word, into discipleship, some of the things that will happen is that the things that would take so long for men to heal from, because of the power of the word of God, people will begin to heal instantly. I have had experiences where I thought I'll be devastated forever by this thing, but the Lord will heal my heart instantly, because there's a way of the world, and the way of the world is very big on people remaining in a certain state, naming themselves, I am always depressed, I'm always anxious. But what God is doing in the church now is raising miracle workers, especially in the area of emotional wellness, where God is able to heal people even instantly from some of the things that should have taken them forever to heal from, the things you would be branded and you're told, this is who you are, and God just instantly gets you out of that. Yeah, I believe that's what the Lord is doing. What faithful obedience means to me is, number one, is swift obedience. And this is critical because the people that obey swiftly, obey, learn quickly, make mistakes, pick up and begin to succeed while the people who are second guessing themselves are still figuring out where to start. Faithful obedience means that even when you don't know what the entire result is going to be, you still step out. Faithful obedience means that you have a commitment, a life commitment to the voice of God, that you're committed to put your ear on his heart and just listen to what he's saying. And being faithfully obedient also means that you are willing to let go of the things that easily beset, the things that would stop you from obeying God, that you're willing to make the sacrifices to let certain things go so that you can be able to do what the Lord will ask you to do. For any woman that's planning to serve God in ministry and is afraid to start, one of the things that I'd like you to know is that you have to do it afraid. You have to do it afraid. Don't over glorify your feelings. Sometimes what we are afraid of does not exist. And sometimes you are well equipped to deal with whatever you are afraid of. And where you feel you're not, you are a child of the living God. God is able and he is willing to help you until you are strong. And so please begin, and begin swiftly. One of the things that has helped me greatly is that I belong to a network of women pastors that I lead called the Kayil Network, where we are able to sit, to talk, to build each other up, encourage each other, and spur each other onto good works. And so if you can, please join a network, join up a group of other women pastors or women ministers that are able to encourage you. If you can, get a coach, throw yourself into prayer, because God is the one who does wonders without number. And as you begin to do so, you'll be amazed that God actually really needs you to take your place. The world is in need of the expression of the sons of God. Yeah.